Hello and welcome to SHEnanigans. This is a show where we interview women in the community doing amazing things, telling their stories and amplifying their work. Today I have Annie Valentine in with me. She is the founder of Annie Valentine Consulting, where she helps communities, organizations, and individuals with mental health and eating disorders. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Welcome to the show, Annie. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. I think the work that you do goes under the radar a lot, and a lot of people either don't understand the type of work that you do, the need for it, and how it actually comes about or what it involves. So can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do? Let's start there.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it is somewhat of an anomaly trying to talk about mental health education outside of what mental illness is or crisis response, treatment. My goal is to really educate people, to give people options and better understanding of what mental health actually is, because we all have it. We don't all have mental illness, or if people want to also name it as mental challenges, there's lots of different ways that we want to approach the language around it.
Right.
But in terms of mental health, we all have it, right? And so how can we build a relationship with it or better understand it? We have such a whole range of understanding of our physical health, but we haven't really spent a lot of time on what mental health literacy truly is.
Yeah, and I want to make a correction or just make a clarification. You're not doing mental health counseling or therapy. You're really doing the education piece. And I think you're right. You are absolutely right in that it is very siloed and it is stigmatized. Even if you look at our health insurance, right? It's like the physical body, eyes, dental, all of these are compartmentalized, and mental health is one of them as well, right? Yeah. Go ahead.
I was just going to say I went in for my 6-month checkup to my dentist last week, and they are the most empowering humans there. But they were asking what my journey was and what I was doing, and I was just expressing a little bit of where I'm at right now in this new endeavor of creating this project for myself. And we were talking about, we go in every 6 months to have our teeth looked at, see what's going on, do some tune-ups. And I said, wouldn't it be great if we had the opportunity to do that around our mental health? And it could look a lot of different ways, right? It could be a therapy session. It could just be like an overall, here's your, the wellness wheel, and where are the parts that are like getting a lot of great attention, and where might we want to spend a little bit more time getting some new tools.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I think I was just, as you were talking, trying to remember the last time I had anything that even approximated that. And I think it was the last time I went in for something medical, like an x-ray or something, and you fill out the form. It's like, are you harming yourself? Do you feel safe at home? And I think those are the only times I've ever been asked those questions if I haven't gone to like a therapy place. So tell us what it is exactly that you do and who you serve.
Sure. So I'll give you just a little glimpse into my background, is that I have been at the University of Vermont on the college side, working in the Center for Health and Wellbeing in a great office that was all around harm reduction, around the whole host of kind of issues, if you will, that impact our college students, and had a great opportunity to work with students, staff, faculty, their parents, alums, like really the whole ecosystem there. And so in that career, and I'm really grateful for the opportunities that I had there, I became a mental health first aid trainer. I brought suicide prevention efforts to the campus through something that's called JED Campus, which is really looking at strategic frameworks to understand and address suicide and suicidal ideation, obviously specifically within the college population. I worked on bystander intervention strategies and really started to delve deep into eating disorder education, which is my area of true passion and want to learn more about. And so after leaving the university about 2 years ago, I decided that there aren't a lot of people like myself providing educational opportunities, trainings to really look at, if we want to say kind of public health approach, or looking at what are the variables, right, that are impacting both our workforce, our families, individuals. We can break it down into all the granulars, the equity that goes into it, and that is not necessarily addressed, the identity pieces. And so over the last 2 years, I've really been trying to tease apart my own experience, having left an institution that I was at for over 20 years, and the work that I did there, which I'm really grateful for, but seeing what other sectors and what other areas could really benefit for some skill building, some education, if we break it down to like knowledge, skills, and awareness, and being able to add some, whether it be professional development in some organizations, is it doing outside kind of community building, let me share on this topic?
Or even just a conversation, right? I think people don't, and as you were talking about, bystander intervention, I just got this vision or visual in my head of, or comparison to CPR, right? Like we all are encouraged to understand, to at least know basic CPR, know what to do, recognize the signs of somebody in medical distress. And it would appear to me that mental health first aid is kind of like the same thing. We should all be able to recognize somebody in distress and how to help them.
Right.
Is that where you're going with this?
Yes, for sure. And that, I think, is a big foundation of mental health first aid. As a national training, it really is, it provides those same type of tools, like you kind of rely on this acronym, if you will, right, to say, okay, so can I assess? Do I listen? Give some reassurance, and then also knowing what you have the capability to do, right? I've been talking with some folks. Clearly, we're in a time right now where things are pretty heightened, and people are living in some fear and trepidation and don't feel necessarily adequate to put themselves in harm's way. And by no means is that the ask. The ask is to see what you might be capable of doing and knowing that there's always something you can do.
Yeah. And I think too, like this for me, I mean, and my eyes have only just been opened to the, even the concept of mental health first aid. I didn't even know that this existed until a couple of years ago. But it would seem like in the pandemic kind of started a whole bunch of stress for people, and from there it's been up and down, just watching, and I imagine this is just compounding stuff that hasn't actually even settled yet from that time, right?
Yes.
So what exactly is mental health first aid? Because that's such a nebulous kind of term.
Sure, yeah. So like I mentioned, it is a training, much like there's a variety of trainings that are out there. If you are familiar with any of the suicide awareness and I think prevention, if you will, trainings, whether it's QPR.
I'm not really. I know like the suicide hotline and what to do and what to say and not to say, kind of, but that's really it.
Yeah. So just kind of in that field, right, there has been a number of trainings that have been, and they've been called historically gatekeeper trainings. I think the language is shifting a little bit around that, but having people knowledgeable around signs, symptoms, what are some of the contributing factors to suicide, and then how to ask the kind of appropriate questions, if you will, and then getting people to the resources that are needed. And so suicide has been something, again, that has been so taboo, has been so stigmatized, has been incredibly hard to talk about, and there's been lots of great movement in that area. So mental health first aid really looks at some of the most common mental health challenges, if you will. So the training really talks about depression, anxiety, panic attacks, kind of a host of things that we know to be pretty prevalent, and then giving us an understanding of how to look at when we might see early signs, worsening signs, and then when a person may be in what we consider crisis, and what are the questions that we can ask. And what I love about it, of anything in the training, is what are the things that we can offer someone, right?
Even if you're not an expert.
Even if you're not an expert. You're like, hey, we don't want you to be an expert. Like, this is not a training to make you a counselor. It is to say, what do you know is available? And what might connect with this person? You might be a first aider to someone that you know really well. You might be a first aider to someone that you see on the street, but you're offering things and not giving advice. You're not saying, I think you should do this. It's maybe.
Which is always like the first reaction to that is going to be resistance, right?
Yeah. Or when we are giving advice to someone when we may be in a place of emotional, distressed, or we're feeling shame. We don't know what to do. When someone says, go and do this thing, you might feel like, I don't have the capabilities to do that.
They don't know the context.
No.
They don't know the backstory.
Or like, I've never called before. This is not something I do in my family. We don't talk about that. And then I think another big barrier is finances. Where do I go to find these resources? And so the idea of offering options and like maybe making some small steps for someone, right? Have you thought about talking to a good friend? Do you have a spiritual counselor? Do you what are the different places that you can go to just make that connection, and then hopefully get people to the appropriate care that is beyond, as you mentioned, we're not therapists, we're not asking people to go outside of the realms of what they feel comfortable in, and yet, much like CPR, what can we do to potentially stabilize a situation? And oftentimes, and for a person to be seen, right, and valued, and to oftentimes, folks are suffering in a lot of silence and a lot of shame and just embarrassment. And so how can we do it in a way that's that we see people?
Yeah, that's really compassionate. So are there levels, of this training? I think I know you work with schools, you work with organizations. How does your work take you into all these different spheres, and how do you approach all the different populations that you work with?
Yeah, it's a great question. So with the training from the national organization, there are a few different types of trainings that you can become certified in. I'm certified in what's called adult mental health first aid. There's also a youth mental health first aid training, and then there's also a teen mental health first aid training. So those are to look at those specific populations and some of the variables that are unique to those places and spaces and those identities. And then even within that, you can get a little bit more training around, let's say I did one for higher education, or working with law enforcement, or working with rural communities. In the workplace right now, right? How do we talk about mental health in the workplace? It hasn't been done or necessarily been embraced for a long time, and yet I think the tides are turning a bit in that we can't leave ourselves at home anymore. Right? Yeah. And as you brought up COVID, and there's so much that we're contending with, and so the training allows us to, curate it a little bit more for the audiences that we're working with. And so for me, I'm really just reaching out to folks, trying to hear what businesses or different organizations, communities are in need of. What are they thinking would be helpful in terms of professional development for their staffing? And sometimes it is this mental health first aid. I've also just recently become certified in what's called mental health literacy aware. And so that's just a little bit more of a shorter training that really gets to understanding why the need for mental health literacy. And then moving into the mental health first aid, and then moving into things like de-escalation, which is both that internal de-escalation when we're
giving you some tools to just
take a deep breath,
bring it down.
And when you can feel fearful that you don't know what to do, we want to do it perfectly. And I just want to invite us all to recognize that there's no right or wrong way to do this work. It is so complex because as humans, we're complex.
I was just going to say, when you were talking about all these different elements or sections of the community, how do you understand, or how do you even begin to understand the context that these people are working in? What law enforcement folks are dealing with is going to be massively different from what people in the healthcare system are working with versus, people in an academic setting. So how do you navigate all those different groups and challenges?
Probably not eloquently, but I think that it's process and content. Right? Content is, I think there are some universals that we can lean into, that we know that anxiety, what I kind of frame as, is the zeitgeist of our time, right? People living with this anxiousness, and if we think of anxiety as fear kind of motivated, we're all in this place of not knowing what's coming next for lots of different reasons. And so there's these underlying currents, right, that can come up in folks. And then when you're working with let's see, public-facing folks, right? So if it's police officers, or I've recently been working with a lot of great folks over at East Rise, so front of the house kind of, and knowing that people might come in elevated and needing something and wanting something, they're demanding something, and you might need, or in the role that you're in, you're providing a service or they want something from you. And so sometimes it's transactional, sometimes it is building a relationship. And so I see some of it as similar in some ways, but then I also think it's on me to do a little bit more research and investigating. So I've done some field work, if you will. This past summer I worked with the Green Mountain Transit bus drivers, and it was a beautiful and hard conversation, and also just listening to their experiences, and I was challenged a little bit, and I'm glad that they did, to say, how do you know what our experiences are like? And so for the next 2 weeks, I was riding the bus.
Learning.
Yeah, I went out and and not that that's going to give me by any means, all of the answers, but I wanted to get a sense of what is happening on different routes. What is it like to maybe be a dependent rider versus a chosen rider, and the different folks who are managing that big piece of machinery, all the while having a whole host of folks on the bus that are coming on with all of their own challenges or highs and lows.
Yeah, I mean, and awareness is the first step, right? I was thinking of my couple of last bus experiences, and sometimes, not that I want to diminish it, but I'm thinking of like how I'm training my dog, for example, right? And I've always been taught like that, a dog with reactivity is a bad dog or is an aggressive dog, or they're giving you a hard time. They're not. They're having a hard time. Yes. Pain makes an animal react in a certain way. And so people too, if they're in pain, whether it's physical pain, mental pain, something else, they're going to react in a way that might not be normal, right? Or I don't. The language in this is so
just not in their
charged,
right?
But like not normal for them.
For them, right? Yeah, they're not in like this kind of like good equilibrium, if you will, or a place where their nervous system isn't completely activated, because we don't know the 10 things that they had to do to get to that moment to get on the bus, or if the bus was late. That was one thing, right? The bus is going to be late sometimes. Right. We want to try to prepare for it. But if you have some place to be, right, then that gets...
The stress is compounding. Yeah. Everybody has a story. Everybody's got something going on.
Yeah. So kind of working with these different areas, and as you mentioned, they all have, their own variety and flair, if you will, of intensity and what they, and we all are as a community noticing and seeing. And so, for me as an individual, I want to lean into some empathy and compassionate curiosity, because I'm right alongside everyone learning and growing, but really want to be part of this community, specifically living in Chittenden County, but like our global community, because we're all feeling the intensity of so many different things. And that the tools to be able to respond to it are going to be different for all of us. Right? It's not going to be a one, like, just do this thing. Right. Because there's lots of reasons why that might not work for some folks.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit in the time that we have left of like how you even got into this. How did you discover this area? And because it's clear you are super passionate about this. Your face just lights up as you start talking about it. And I've seen you at work in some respects, how you're delivering. Where did your journey start?
Yeah. Thank you. That's a great question. It's one that I feel very connected to, and as an authentic, I think, educator and facilitator, for me, being authentic and vulnerable is really one way that sometimes I can connect with my audience. There could be 10 people doing the same thing. But my journey is that I have struggled my entire life, right? In being, whether it's diagnosed or just coming to terms with the fact that I had a mental health challenge early on and was diagnosed and hospitalized for an eating disorder that really has shaped a lot of my life for some difficult moments, but for some really, really grateful moments. I spent a lot of time writing about it and trying to create my narrative around it. And so I often think about this word recovery as reclaiming and discovering constantly. And whether that's about, the eating disorder that I went through, but also the mental health components that went into it and the variables. And so that's a little bit about a little, you know, having lived that. And then also my family is not immune and has not been and is very much, and so I think there's that piece. And then I've just been drawn to, for whether it's spiritually or how I was raised, around giving to others. And it's just somehow it connected for me. And in some ways wanting to use my story to be a connector for others who might find hope in it or find some kind of connection, and then really having people know that they're not alone.
Yeah. As you're talking, it makes me curious, you know, from a lot of times when I talk to people why they're doing the things they do, it's not only the personal experience, but also of not having had the resources that they wish they'd had and now being able to provide them. Is there a little bit of that in there for you as well?
There is, yes. And on the opposite side, I would also say I somehow had this family that approached it in a very graceful way. Yeah, a few days ago, a woman was asking me about protective factors, right? We talk about risk factors and protective factors. And I said, you know, my mother showed up in a way that was so humble, and that she didn't know what the answers were, and she didn't want to pretend that she could try to fix it, but that she was going to lean on our village, right? And I have a whole host of amazing Shiras in my world, who also approached it in that way, like really not. I'm sure they were angry at me at times because there's a whole host of emotions that come up, but that were there for me, and trying to the best that they could is understand and not try to fix it. And that's what I think is a really delicate thing around this area to look at, is that there is no quick fix. I see it in parallel to substance use. With substance use, you can stay abstinent, right? You can try to keep that thing out of your life. And with eating disorders, it is always going to be there.
Yeah.
And so what I didn't have back then was this just more, we don't have as much education as I would like, but there's definitely more information around it. And really looking at weight neutrality and looking at, you know, health at every size. And so some of those components definitely weren't there. I think in my high school, I probably paved the path, if you will. And there's some really not so great things about that. And it opened the conversation up, right? And that's my hope, as both a person in recovery, as an educator and advocate, as a mother of a little one, and as a dear friend to so many women who are raising little ones right now. And please know that eating disorders do not discriminate.
Yeah.
It is not a little white girl or white girl's issue. It is impacting all aspects of our communities. And so just wanting to bring to light the fact that we don't often hear some of those stories because of the shame and the stigma. And so our research and our data is actually pretty skewed due to that.
That makes so much sense, because people aren't going to self-volunteer or nominate. Do you think that, you know, as we started out at the beginning of this conversation, there are these stigmas around mental health and eating disorders and everything in between? Is that getting better, or is it up and down? Like,
yeah, I think it ebbs and flows, right? And I wonder where that, you know, we can talk about the advocacy and talk about mental health and illness, and we get some information on it, and then it gets kind of, the reaction to it can be like, we're talking about it too much, and I don't know if we found the sweet spot of how to embrace it in a way that it's part of everyday living and life.
I feel like there's several conversations or several topics like that, right? Like death, you know, politics, intimacy, like all these things that we kind of skirt around, we dance around, we don't really say what we mean. Even dating, right? Like we don't say what we want, what we mean. So until we can start having these conversations just openly and naturally, they're always going to be slightly awkward. So we just need to normalize these conversations, right? And like, I'm struggling, and it's okay for me to say, I'm struggling. And then you need to be able to be like, okay, you're struggling. What do we do about it, right? Like, it's not something to hide behind a curtain or under a blanket.
Right, and just validate people, right? Like, you're struggling, like, Nope.
Okay, I hear you. I don't have to solve it. I just have to sit here and hear you,
And
right?
listen to you.
Yeah.
And not try to validate it. I mean, excuse me, not validate, but like fix it away, or like, there's all kinds of things like, oh, well, you think you've got it bad? Well, listen to,
We
it's like,
don't need to one up each other.
no, because I'm sure we all got our things, but just, wow, that is really hard right now, and I see you.
Yeah.
And like what might be helpful, or can I give you a hug? Like offering just some things that can really make that connection, and then maybe that person then will take you up on another offer to maybe seek out the next step.
Yeah, because then you've shown that you can be a safe space. So in the time we have left, how do people work with you, and what kind of services do you offer?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So these days I'm at Hula Lakeside quite a bit, bebopping around with my air desk.
What a great place to feel good.
It is just right now with like light and great plants. So I'm there, and then you can find me at my website, AnnieValentineCC.com, which is similar to my social media handles, which I'm
all over those?
trying, no, not so much, but I'm working on them.
Okay.
And then you can request whether it's a training, a one-on-one to just explore some options for whether it's a community that you're working with. So let's say the Girl Scouts, or if it's with Girls on the
senior
Run,
center,
or the senior center, or if it's a larger organization that is looking to build out, whether it's human resources and people and culture, and thinking about some other ways to support staff that way. I'm really open to both sharing what I have developed, but then working to, again, I keep using that word curate, but I love it, but to make it so that it fits the needs of your organization or the needs of the workforce that you're working in, because we know that data is showing that there's a whole host of needs that we are needing to keep people
I can just
moving.
imagine that it's like you said, community groups, school groups, work groups, but also things like clubs and sports teams, any place that there's a gathering of humans that are trying to interact with each other, that this makes sense. And do you do this, how do you do it? Is it in-person facilitated? Do you do online workshops, combination? Like, if somebody in Timbuktu wanted to hire you, could they? I mean,
they could fly me to Timbuktu. They could fly me wherever. But yes, I definitely do think virtually, hybrid. I love in person, as you can imagine.
It's a different energy, yeah.
Right, it definitely is. And I know that there are limitations if you're working with an organization that has many different satellite offices. And so, utilize, all the different platforms and try to make it as engaging as possible through those platforms. So I'm very flexible in those ways.
And how about privacy? That's one thing that we haven't talked about. Like I keep coming back to like the workplace, where it's shame already on the individual, but then you don't want your coworkers to know you're struggling with things necessarily, right? I'm assuming, but so how does privacy work into it when you're working with groups like this?
Sure. I think the idea of what I try to set up in these spaces is that, it's one of my beliefs is that I can't necessarily create a safe space for people. What I do when I set up is a courageous and brave space for people. And so again, this is not therapy, it's more education, it's skill building, and I do welcome people to share what they feel comfortable with, all the while knowing, right, that this is this container. We want to do the best that we can to honor people's stories and their experiences, but there's always there can be a fine line. And so I think my role as a facilitator is in trying to make sure that we are feeling comfortable with each other. People are sharing, but there's all the skills of a facilitator.
Yeah. I just realized my question was like on the other side of it. And you're training people to recognize the symptoms in each other, but at the same time, having those conversations at work is going to be really hard too, right? And then people are like, well, does HR need to get involved, or all these things that people fear on top of it.
Well, and I thank you for bringing that up. But I've done sessions where the HR representative is in the session with the folks that are there, and they are trying to recognize that they're all in it together. They're all wanting the same things, and so we're just reminding that it's not therapy. If there is sharing, how do we want to do that in a way that is productive, if you will, but also knowing that there could be some tears and some compassionate pieces.
I'm curious, how do companies that have, or groups that have had you come in and do workshops, what is the results for them? What do they get out of having their employees or group members be more aware?
I think it definitely helps. Well, I've gotten feedback and responses that it's helped people feel a little bit more confident when they do have, let's say, their supervisee is coming in with maybe some emotions, right? That they aren't necessarily, like, I wasn't trained to deal with these emotions, but to offer, again, a couple of suggestions, or to just sit and say, I see you, and potentially let that pass, and then it gets to the next.
So it really helps the person that is having the challenge as well as the person that is witnessing it or experiencing it, and helping both feel confident and safe. Like I know, like, if I come up with a situation I don't know how to handle, it's stressful, right? Like, I don't know what to do and I don't know how to help this person. So I can imagine that it's really beneficial for everybody in the room.
I think so. Yeah, it's not just a quick pass. Like, I can't deal with this. You might not be able to, but again, if you give 3 minutes or 5 minutes and validate that person, and they might be able to work themselves down for a moment, and then they get to, again, that next step, versus being dismissed and then maybe feeling embarrassed, and then the stigma just continues on. So yeah, I do get a lot of responses from the folks that are learning the skills saying, I feel just a little bit more confident, or I can like do some scenario building around what this can look like, and for my team, because nurturing that a kind of a workplace of compassionate, again, curiosity, and not that it needs to be like forgetting about the work that has to be done.
Absolutely.
But also knowing that we're humans right now, living in a time that is pretty
hard. Yeah, as you were saying that, I was thinking back to when I was a supervisor, and I had no idea what I was doing, and I would have loved to have something, just like a little lesson, a module on this, on human behavior and how to respond to your employees when things crop up. Yeah. This should be a part of everybody's onboarding and orientation. Every supervisor leader's training.
That's my hope. And it is a pretty long training, but I'm hoping that, again, when I work with folks, like, if it's not, because you're asking what do they get out of it, sometimes people like the certification, because you do get a certification. The mental health literacy, the newer version that I'm working on, you get a certificate. But if people really are just wanting those skills and getting some, just versing themselves in this, we can make that happen in a few hours, just to start the conversation.
Yeah, I think that's just sounds so important, to just be aware of your surroundings and be able to respond appropriately, and just help us build more compassionate communities. That it just keeps going back to, it's a cliche, but it takes a village. Like, it really does.
It really does.
And it's not just raising our children, it's caring for everybody all the way to the very end. And this is part of it, taking care of our brains as well as our bodies.
Yeah, and they all come, like, it's all connected.
It really is. Thank you so much for coming and chatting with me. Annie Valentine Consulting, AnnieValentineCC.com, right? And so if you are interested in working with Annie, learning more about what she offers, scheduling a workshop for your community group or institution or organization or company, reach out to her. And if you have suggestions for future guests, please let me know that too at 2icopy.com/SHEnanigans. Thank you again, Annie.
Thank you.
This was fun.
This was great.